C worship service this evening. I am so glad to see you here this evening and am excited about all that this worship service will offer. We have two special guests with us tonight. First, we have PG Banker, who is a friend of John's and will be playing with our Open Heart Band this evening. And we also have Dan Hasseltine, and I will be introducing him more here in a little bit. As you think about the coming months, next month, August 4th, will be our next Come and See. So go ahead and get your phone out and mark your calendar, because we do have a special gospel band that will be here, work in progress, with some of our very own members who participate in that band, and we're excited to have them. We have food trucks here today to offer some additional fellowship at the end of service, and I hope that you will stay and eat with us and fellowship with us and just join in us with us as we move through this evening. Tonight, we begin to focus on charity. What is charity? What does it look like in our lives today? How do we show charity to one another? Proverbs tells us, one who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for a good deed. As we move into this worship time tonight, let us begin this hour with a moment of prayer. Father God, we just praise you for bringing us together tonight, that we have this beautiful opportunity to worship together, to praise you, to look within ourselves, and to find you with us. And Lord, we pray that as we move through this hour, you will move in us and we will feel your spirit in this place. We pray all of these things in your precious and holy name. Amen. We're going to kick off with some music tonight. Feel free to stand and join us, or sit and enjoy the music, however you feel most led as we move through this hour of worship.
You've been walking the same old road for miles and miles. You've been hearing the same old voice and the same old lies. You've been trying to sing the same old holes of life. But there's a better life. There's a better life. You got better. You can feel it, but it's
Amen. Put your hands together if you love the Lord. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. So happy you guys are here. No matter what happens in our lives, no matter where we go or where we've been, whatever path we've been down, we can always find a new path. Because God does love us and He does forgive us and He does make beautiful things out of us.
This pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life could really change at all. This earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up from the ground at all? You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. Round, hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found in you. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful
things. You make
one more time now.
You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dark. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dark. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for making beautiful things out of us. We love you so much. Amen.
You know what, John, what I love about that song is it just reminds me that no matter how broken I feel like my life is or how much I've messed up, God can work with that. No matter what, there is room for God and room for grace. Psalm 112, verses 5 through 9, reminds us that good will come to those who are generous and lend freely, who conduct their affairs with justice. Surely the righteous will never be shaken. They will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord. My name is Leslie Trail. I don't know that I introduced myself earlier to you. I'm the director of children's ministries here. And I will tell you, as a Christian, I look at that verse and I say, well, sometimes I do have fear of bad news. And sometimes I do feel broken. And sometimes I do wonder how God can pick up those pieces. But then I look around me and there's beauty. And the pieces do somehow get picked up. And maybe they don't get put back the way they were before, but they get picked up. And there is hope, and there is grace, and there is love. And tonight, as we come together in this place of worship, we have an opportunity to look for and to seek the hope, the grace, and the love. And to find it not only in the words of the songs, but also in the fellowship and the hearts of those who are gathered here together. And so as we move through this special music that John is going to share with us called Only Love Can Save Us Now, we are going to offer a time of offering, but not only necessarily a financial offering, because we're going to pass the plates, but an offering of our hearts. And I would invite you, as we move through this song and as John sings this song, to just offer your heart. And let's offer the broken pieces and be open to seeking where God can bring those beautiful things. Amen.
The world can be such a crazy place, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can make it better with some love and grace. It's about time to make a change. Only love can save us now. Only love can save us now. 'Cause we can be forgiven, forgiven, and given another chance. Only love can save us now. I know we're all supposed to be one, every daughter and every son. There's still so much that can be done to make a better world for everyone. Only love can save us now. Only love can save us now. 'Cause we can be forgiven, forgiven and given another chance. But only love can save us now. You know you can't change the world without changing yourself. There won't be peace around the world until there's peace inside ourselves. Until there's peace inside ourselves. Cause only love can save us now. Only love can save us now. 'Cause we can be forgiven, forgiven, and given another chance. 'Cause only love can save us now.
Let us pray. God, for the gifts you have given us, for the ways you pick up our broken pieces, for the many ways we see you in our lives, we are grateful. Amen. It gives me deep, deep, deep pleasure and a feeling of great honor to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Dan Hasseltine is not only the lead singer of Jars of Clay, and when I asked him what awards he would like me to mention, he said, you don't have to mention any of that. He's also a very humble gentleman. He is a father of 2 teenagers, and that alone is a special thing. And also the founder of Bloodwater Mission, which he has come to share with us about tonight. I would like to introduce Dan Hasseltine, and let's welcome him to Trinity.
Thank you. I think when she mentioned that I had 2 teenage boys, I realized that's probably what actually humbles any of us, is having teenagers, right? Thanks for letting me come and be a part of this this evening. I read a story. Gosh, it's been probably 5 or 6 years ago now, but it was the story of a man who walked out his front door, and he it was just a bright sunny day, probably like today. Felt pretty decent, not too hot, but hot enough, and he was a little bored, and so he went and got himself a lawn chair, and he put it out in his backyard, and he went and found, I'm not sure how he found them, but he got a couple weather balloons, and he thought, you know, what's going to happen if I wonder if I can put these on the chair and just, you know, float a little bit, just hover. And so he did. He attached a couple of these weather balloons. He put some cinder blocks down and had some cord anchored around it so they wouldn't really go anywhere. And then he sat in his chair and then cut the anchor ropes. And instead of just slowly lifting off a little bit, he shot way up into the air and just kept going. And kept going, and eventually ended up floating over into air traffic space at his local airport. And so they had to try to get him down, and so they sent helicopters in to try to find and get this guy and try to see if they could get close enough to him. But every time the helicopter would move in, of course, like balloons do, they just pushed him over, and so they couldn't really get him down. So eventually they figured out that he was going to have to, they had to shoot at least one of those balloons and have him hang on. And well, after, I think the story goes that it took him about 6 or 7 hours of floating around and all of this kind of drama, and finally to get him back down on the ground. And they asked him, they said, you know, what in the world would make you do something like this? And his only response was, well, a guy can't just sit around. I want to take you off the hook a little bit tonight. Everybody wants to do great things, right? But it's not actually probably what we're really all called to be about. There's a great Mother Teresa quote that says, we can do no great things, only small things with great love. And I want to talk about that a little bit tonight because it's really the heart and soul of the work that I do. I started Bloodwater, and I'll tell you what Bloodwater is first. It's an organization that our work is centered around the work of bringing and helping people in Africa have access to clean water. It began about almost 15 years ago now, when I was traveling with the band Jars of Clay, and we were approached, and the year was 2001, and someone came to the band and said, hey, there is a crisis developing in certain parts of Africa. HIV is on the rise. It's a disease that's really, it's killing people at just alarming rates. And the church at large, which is probably the community that is most well mobilized to handle something of this magnitude, have spoken. And the response from the church has been that this disease is a little too complicated for them, and they've said that they don't want any part of it. And the way that they knew that was they had taken a poll. They had asked people in the church if they had an opportunity to help somebody who was HIV positive, would they? And the poll came back, and this was a poll that was given to people in the church, evangelical communities where people were actively involved in their church. This wasn't just people that said they went to church and went on Easter Sunday or on Christmas. This is people that it was part of their culture, part of their tradition, their faith. They were part of a community like that. They asked them if they had a chance to help somebody with HIV, would they? And only 3% said that they would. It was somewhat shocking for everyone. So they started, a lot of the organizations that were paying attention to what was happening and watching this crisis develop, they said, well, what can we do? What can we do to start getting people interested in helping somebody with HIV? Because it's having this devastating effect in Eastern and Southern Africa. And I said, well, I don't know. We can talk about it from stage. And at the time, JARS had a pretty good platform back then. And so they said, well, would you? And they started feeding us statistics about how many orphan children there were because parents had died, what was happening in these communities. But I felt like after a year of talking to people, I wasn't any closer. So I finally had a chance to go, and I took a trip in December of 2001, and I went, it was December, I think it was December 7th. I left the U.S. and headed to Africa, touched down, and got in a little van with a driver who introduced himself to me, and I introduced myself to him, and he said, okay, we're going to play a little game. We were in South Africa at the time, and he said, I'm going to drive you through a community, and I want you to find somebody that looks older than 13. I thought, well, how hard could that be, right? So we start driving around, and long story short, about 10 minutes into the drive, I realized I couldn't find anyone. And he said, well, you won't, because everybody that's older than 13 has died. So this is an entire community of people that's just kids trying to raise themselves. I had the opportunity to drive in a van with a group of men that were going to be tested for HIV. And if you don't know much about HIV, I'll just backtrack just for a quick second. HIV is a disease that attacks the immune system. And so that your immune system then cannot fight back against even the simplest of viruses or colds or things like that. And people die because of the diseases that end up attacking their body because they don't have the ability to fight it off. And so anyway, in Africa, there wasn't a lot of information in these parts of South Africa. I spent time in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Malawi. And in all of these places, there's this great fear, because for all of the information and how quickly it travels in the U.S. about things, we still are pretty afraid of a lot of things that we probably don't need to be afraid of. In Africa, where information travels much less quickly, all people know is that people that live near them are dying from a disease, and they're not sure why it happens, how it happens, whether or not they're going to contract it. And so they start making up ideas about how that would happen, and it creates this incredible stigma. So if people even think that you're HIV positive in these parts of South Africa, you'll lose your job. Your family will disown you. You will be excommunicated. It was very similar to what most of us would understand as what lepers had to go through. When we read our Bible, we see that there were these separate colonies of people where lepers had been exiled from where they were because nobody wanted to be near them. It was too contagious. The risk was too great. And so they were treated as less than human at that point. Well, that's what was happening in the places where I visited in 2001. And one of the experiences I had was I got in this van in South Africa. Has anyone been to South Africa? It's beautiful. And in fact, there's this great coastline and these communities that are right on the beach. And then there are these huge mountains. And you have to drive through these mountains to get down into the city where you can be tested for HIV. And I got in a van with a bunch of guys that were all going to be tested. And the trip there was so incredible. It was so fun. Everybody was just telling stories and laughing and telling jokes and singing songs. And then on the way back, it was completely silent. Every one of those men found out that they were HIV positive. Every one of those men was looking out a different window in that van, thinking about what it was going to mean for them, what they had to do in their own homes. Do they tell their spouses? Do they not? Do they keep it a secret? By keeping it a secret, would they then end up killing their spouse, giving the disease to their spouse? Could their children get it? Would it be better if they just lost their job and got pushed out? It's a very human experience, and it is what solidified it in me, this idea that, okay, for all of these big, overwhelming statistics we hear about causes, for all of the things we want to step into, it's got to be a human story first. We've got to remember that these are real people. Otherwise, we do create obstacles for helping people, right? We think of good reasons not to do it. And there are plenty of good reasons not to help somebody. Well, that was the first part of how Bloodwater started, is because I had a chance to go and experience what HIV was doing in places in Africa. The second part was in all of the villages where we went in rural parts of Africa, in Malawi and in Zimbabwe and these places, the communities where people had a high level of HIV were also places where people didn't have access to something as basic as clean water. So you had all of these people living with immune systems that were being destroyed, and they had to drink water from rivers and lakes and streams. And a lot of times, even some of the places that we're working right now, you would have a community that existed up on a hill, and then there would be another community down at the bottom of that hill. And the people at the top, all of the things that they would produce and then throw away, and all of the trash and the latrines or whatever they had, all of that runoff would come down the hill and pool in the water down where the other community was. And that's what that community at the bottom of the hill would have to drink, would have to use to cook and to clean with. And so you can see how something like that would be problematic, right? That if you don't have a good immune system, you're going to get sick because of that. Even if you had the best immune system in the world, you would probably get sick from that. Well, this was a very common occurrence in most of the communities, and we thought, well, if the church is not interested in talking about HIV and AIDS, maybe we can talk to them about clean water. Maybe they'll be interested in helping someone have access to clean water. And we were right. We came home. We said, all right, we're just going to start talking about clean water and see who shows up, who thinks it's a good idea that people across the globe should have access to this very most basic of survival needs. And we found that people were very interested. And Jars of Clay, we went and we did our first concert where we actually asked people for money to help us put in a clean water well in a community. And there were, it was at a Six Flags theme park. And it was actually illegal for us to ask people for money from stage, but we didn't much care. I had gotten a phone call earlier that morning from somebody, and they had said, look, we've got a community that is in the Central African Republic, and it's a community that has, the drill rig is on the community, they're ready to drill it, but the funder pulled out. He decided he wasn't going to fund that water project, and so the people are waiting, and we need to see if we can come up with the funds for it. I said, all right, well, we'll see what we can do. So during the concert that night, I said, all right, I asked the audience, I just said, look, we need $1,500. That was it. That's all we needed. $1,500 to help. So this guy, I can make a phone call and say, start drilling. And that night, we had just gotten a bunch of like popcorn buckets, and people just started putting cash in, and we went and counted it in the back of the van, or back of the bus after the show, and we had raised $1,552, which was the exact amount that they needed, the $1,500, and the exact amount of the wire transfer to get the money to them. And so we've been asking for money at shows ever since. Since Bloodwater started, we've been able to help over 1 million people have access to clean water. We've been able to raise about $37 million. But our work has changed over the years. We don't just put in clean water wells. That's one thing that you can do. And there is a sense, like when we talk about charity, that just giving something to somebody else is a way. But I actually think that what charity really means is more this sense of affirming in somebody who they are. It's one thing to say, or to kind of push your way in or say, you know what, let me fix your problem for you. And it's another thing entirely to say, you know you have what it takes to fix your problem. Let me help you. It's about empowering, being generous enough to be humble enough to not see ourselves as the answer to someone's problem, but rather we're the conduit to be able to say, you know what? You actually have what it takes. You're worth it. You have all of the tools you need, and I'm just here to remind you of that and to keep pushing you forward. That's what we do at Bloodwater, and that's a very strange concept. So what do you actually do? Well, when we go to Africa, we do two things. We work with grassroots organizations on the ground in Africa. So these are organizations that are started by Africans in their communities to fix and solve the problem of not having access to clean water. We find them, or they find us, and then we fund all of the water projects that they want to do, that they've decided are the things that they need to do in their community. That's different than what most organizations do. Most organizations will decide where they want clean water wells. They will say, well, there's a school here, there's a place here, we want you to drill a well here, and they'll hire people to come in and do that. But it'll all come from outside that community. And we have found that that can sometimes, although you provide water for a little while, you don't provide water for generations. Because those people in that community don't own the project, they don't have empowerment for it, and they don't know how to fix it when it breaks. And so when it does break, they just go back to using the river or the lake or the stream that they had before, and they get sick. So for us, we've really felt that it's important that we empower and equip the local community to be able to solve the water crisis in their community. And that means that it gets solved forever. It means that they have ownership. They know how to repair the things that you put in. When you drill a well or give them whatever technology it is that they want to use, whenever you do those things, they know how to put it in. They own it. It's theirs. If you've ever rented a car, you know what it feels like, how we treat things we don't own, right? Rented a hotel room, same thing. We don't treat things we don't own very well. And that's, I think, just a human reality. So we want people to be empowered and to be equipped. And so that's what we do. We fund the projects that the organizations want to do on the ground. The second thing we do is we work with those organizations to help them figure out where they're not doing great work. And this is really strange. If you're going to fund something, the person that you're going to fund is going to want to put their best foot forward, right? They're going to say, look at all the great things we do. It's amazing. It's wonderful. We come in and we say, show us all the things that you don't do well. Show us the places where you're really struggling, where you're just confounded, where you don't have any idea how to move forward. We work with them on identifying those things, the areas where they have the most potential for growth as an organization, and then we provide training, equipping, and all of the things necessary through academies that we've set up for those organizations to grow in all those areas. And what that means is that those local organizations then have the ability to scale, have the ability to do more work in the communities around them, have the ability to be sustainable and be a long-term solution in the communities where they live and work. So that is the most sustainable way of doing water. And when we talk about water, it's sanitation. So that means bathrooms and places to go to the bathroom. And then hygiene. And hygiene is all the things you can think about. It's how to keep water from being contaminated from the time you get it from a well to the time you use it. How to cook and clean properly. How to wash your hands, brush teeth, take care of yourself that way. All of those things happen in the context of water. And then they're trained, these organizations, and that's what becomes the most sustainable piece for all of us and for those in Africa. So, So how do you get involved in something like this? You've probably been a part of a water organization before, and you've heard about, well, I like to give this much money, and that means I'd like to provide a clean water well. Well, we don't really do that, but we do keep it very human. To provide clean water for an individual person for the rest of their life, sanitation, hygiene, HIV support, and trainings around so that they know how to repair wells and do those things is just $40 for the rest of their life. It's not very much, is it? A family of 5 to have clean water, sanitation, hygiene, community support for the rest of their lives is $200. So you can keep seeing how, I can actually imagine what a family looks like. I have one. I know what a single person looks like. None of us have to try to solve the water crisis as a whole. All we have to do is be connected to one family or one person. And we all know that if it was just me, if it was just you, you'd think, well, I hope somebody wouldn't not help because they weren't helping a million people. I like to think that each of our individual stories would matter enough for someone else to intervene and be a part of what it would take to bring me to health or you to health, right? So that's the work of Bloodwater, and it's why I love what I do. I'm a musician and an artist, and somebody gave me the definition early on in my career, which was that a songwriter and artist looks at the world and describes it, not only the way the world is, but also the way that it could be. And this has been the work for me of doing both of those things, seeing the world as it is, but then also working towards how the world could be, not only for me, but for the people that I come in contact with in Africa and the stories that I get to be a part of. So that's what we do. How can you be involved? Donations. It really is a very simple thing. We don't get to do what we do unless people support this work. And it is the most sustainable, beneficial kind of work in this entire sector. We're not the largest organization. We're not the most well-known, but we all know that the loudest voice is not always the best voice. And so for us, if you want to help us, and we would love for your help, ways you can do that are certainly financial support, telling your friends and different people that you know about us. Come into Nashville. Our offices are right downtown. Come say hi to us. We'll take you to Africa. We can do that too if that's something you're interested in. But we like to know that we share this common desire to impact communities as communities. And so as a church, we love the idea of connecting with churches here to help us work in communities in Africa. So there's a lot of different ways to do that kind of work. I've taken way more time than I meant to today, but I want to thank you for letting me come and tell you about Bloodwater. There's stuff out there. I didn't bring anything for sale. I did bring stuff you can look at. We're just down the road in Nashville, though. If there's things that you like, you can come visit us, or you can go online, bloodwater.org. And I'm just grateful for the chance to speak today. Thank you so much.
As we think of charity, when the word first came up, I thought, oh, we're talking about what we can give. And in a way, we think about charity and we do think about giving and how do we give. But you know, that's not really the original definition of charity. The original definition of charity is the love of humankind, especially when we're talking about Christian charity. The great commandment says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Many of you have seen this week, I shared a post from an Episcopal church. And the post says, love your neighbor who doesn't look like you, think like you, love like you, speak like you, pray like you, vote like you. Love your neighbor, no exceptions. And our neighbors have gotten a lot closer in proximity to us. No longer are our neighbors just the house next to us, but they're the country across the ocean. Our neighbors are everywhere, and we are called to love them. And so we leave tonight and we ask ourselves, so how do we serve? What does it look like? Perhaps you decide after listening to Dan talk tonight that you want to help with Blood Water Mission. And I think that would be a wonderful thing. Or perhaps you say, hey, we have this ministry called the Check Wagon. And they go out and they help people in times of crisis. And I haven't been able to help with the Check Wagon, but I sure would like to help with the Check Wagon. And Brad, that would be a pretty wonderful thing too, right? To have some more help. You think you could find a place? Or maybe you say, Sunday mornings, I'm not plugged into a Sunday school class, but we have this group on Sunday mornings that goes and helps the homeless. And I would like to help with that group. I bet we could plug them in there too. Or maybe you say, I saw all these decorations in the halls as I came in, and I'm not yet plugged into Vacation Bible School next week. Perhaps I want to help there, and I know we can plug you in. Or perhaps you say, none of those are speaking to me, but I would like to do something. I'm just not able right now. If you are under the age of 15, I want you to stand up. If you're under the age of 15, you guys, even you can sit back down now. I thought you could stretch your legs though. You might need that. Even my friends under the age of 15, who probably don't have a job at all, can offer service, can offer love. Because it's really simple, friends. Our service and our love don't come out of our pocketbooks. Our service and our love come out of our hearts. And our service and our love are all about how we treat one another. And so our challenge tonight is to find ways to be of charity, to find ways to be of service, but even greater, to find ways to be of love. Is the video possible to pull? It's not going to be pretty because it came from the book of Faith. But as I watched this video and I was thinking about how simple it is to show service and to show love, I thought, oh, this is a nice example of service and love. And my friends who are under 15, I want you to remember this, because you can do this.
Just hand clutched in mine, I'll take this chance, so call me blind. I've been waiting all my life. Please don't scar this young heart. Just take my hand. I was made for loving you, even though we may be hopeless hearts just passing through.
You see, service and love and a cute little raccoon are simple. It's as easy as passing a note and just telling someone that they're amazing. Because I see a lot of amazing in this room. And I'm pretty excited about how this amazing can share amazing through Christ's love.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be, let it be, let it be, yeah, let it be. So whisper words of wisdom, let it be. When the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. Though they may be parted, there is still a chance they will see. There will be an answer, let it be. Oh, let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be. Well, let it be. Well, let it be. Yeah, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. And when the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. I wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be. Let it be. Let it be now. Let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be. Let it be. Yeah, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be.
Before we move to our last song, I have just a couple of logistical things that you need to know before you leave here to eat at the food trucks that are open to you and have items for sale to you that will fill your bellies as we fellowship together. The food trucks are that way. And so if you go to the very, very end of the hall, there you will see right outside the doors the trucks. And we do have barbecue there, as well as there will be desserts there available to purchase. And so before our last song, if you would stand, I will offer the benediction, and then we will close together before we go eat. So please stand. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.